קצת לאט, אני מכוון ליוטיוב גם כן.
זה אופציה כזאת בזום שאתה מזמין שיראו בצד שיש גם קישור ליוטיוב?
כן.
אוקיי.
כן, אני אעשה את זה כל פעם, ככה שיהיה מי שרוצה אחר כך להסתכל.
מזמין שיראו בצד שיש גם קישור ליוטיוב?
כן.
אוקיי.
כן, אני אעשה את זה כל פעם, ככה שיהיה מי שרוצה אחר כך להסתכל. רק שנייה, מיוט. אוקיי. Okay, good evening. We have a special class today with Tazria Metzora, 2 parashot, and we are, sorry, I have a bit of a technical issue. Okay, now we're good to go. So we have 2 parashot, Tazria and Metzora, and we talk about the loss of a person that has tzarat, which is mistranslated usually as leprosy, but as we learn, it's a spiritual illness. Now, something very connected to our times. I was talking with someone the other day, and he tells me on one hand that he's very worried because he has apartments that he rents, and he's worried that his tenants will not be paying rent on time the way he would like them to. And we continue talking, one thing and the other, and a while later, he tells me, you know, I have these stores where I sell my merchandise that I rent from someone, and I'm trying to renegotiate to get a discount to pay less of my rent. And, you know, the way that we think about the situation is the way the situation is for us. So if I'm thinking and I'm acting like chas v'shalom, there is a recession, so that's the way that I will be living. If I'm acting in a way of abundance, that things are good, then everybody around me will follow suit and things will be good. So we can't have it both ways. We can't have it with the people that I owe money, say, oh, there is no money to go around. Now people that owe me try to collect. So yet seems to be that our parasha with the loss of the metzora is trying to have it both ways. And we'll see soon why. So what is the tzarat? A metzora is a person who has an illness in his skin and he doesn't know, is not sure if it's impure or not, because this is a physical manifestation of a spiritual illness. So it needs a process of purification. Why? Because it needs to better its spiritual health. Now, we'll see how this process works, and we'll understand that this is not something that happened thousands of years ago and is not relevant today, but this is something that is very relevant to every one of us in our lives right now. So, I'm going to make it. Okay, so we can. So what does the person have something on his skin do? He calls the Kohen. And the Kohen, again, it's very relevant because the Kohen says he has to be quarantined for 7 days. What does it mean? He has to go outside the camp and he has to be isolated from the rest of humanity. And in the times of the Jews in the desert meant outside the camp. Later, it meant to go outside of Jerusalem, and it could not communicate with others. Why? Because this tzara, this disease on the skin, was because the person had spoken lashon hara. He has used his power of speech to speak evil of somebody else. So therefore, now the process of healing is that he has to be isolated from everybody else. Let's open text number 1. If somebody did not get the text, send me a quick WhatsApp message to 619-726-4645, and I'll be glad to send you by WhatsApp the text for today's class. So text number 1 on student page 3 starts like this. Zot tiyeh Torat metzora b'yom taratu v'ba'al kohen. It's the beginning of our parasha. I will skip straight to the English. It goes like this. This shall be the law of the person afflicted with tzarat on the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought to the priest. The kohen shall go outside the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, the lesion of tzarat has healed in the afflicted person. Then the priest shall order, and the person to be cleansed shall take 2 live clean birds, a cedar stick, a strip of crimson wool, and hyssop. Seems to be very strange, very random ingredients, right? But let's continue with the text. We'll understand, God willing, everything. And if we don't, I'll be glad to answer any questions at the end of the class. The priest should order, and one shall slaughter the one bird into an earthenware vessel over spring water. As for the live bird, he shall take it, and then the cedar stick, the strip of crimson wool, and the hyssop, and along with the live bird, he shall dip them into the blood of the slaughtered bird over the spring water. He shall then sprinkle 7 times upon the person being cleansed from tzarat, and he shall cleanse him. He shall then send away the live bird into the open field. So there is some strange components to this sacrifice that we don't find in others. To understand this, we have to understand that the sin of lashon hara, of speaking evil of others, comes because of pride. Actually, most sins are because of an ego that is too strong, too healthy. So we get rid of this pride, and we replace it with humility. And if you want to put this in 2 words, we can call the problem with metzora the Twitter problem. Now, it's easy. Why does it take 2 birds? Because the Torah is reminding us that birds, it's fine if they tweet and they chirp and they make noise, but for a human to just speak without analyzing the consequences of our speech could be a very serious sin. We cannot just blurt everything that comes to mind. You cannot tweet, chirp like mindless birds, because mindless talking leads to lashon hara. Like Eleanor Roosevelt said, great minds discuss ideas. Average minds discuss events. Small minds discuss people. So a good way to avoid lashon hara is not to talk about people in general. And if you do, as we'll say soon, it's very important to say good, positive, beautiful things about people, never the opposite. So the cedar functions this way. The cedar, it's a very tall, very proud, very strong tree. Symbolizes someone too proud of himself. And he thinks so much of himself that he thinks, oh, I can discuss everybody's life. So text number 2a says, Teorot, clean birds, Why are birds required for this cleansing rite? Because lishon of tzara'at result from lashon hara, which is an act of chattering. So for his cleansing, this person is required to bring birds, which twitter constantly with chirping sounds. A cedar stick, because lishons of tzara'at come because of haughtiness, symbolized by the tall cedar. So the Torah doesn't only focus on the negative, on the ego of this person, it's telling us also what to do right for the future. That's a function of the crimson wool and the hyssop. Why? Because they symbolize humility, the character trait that the metzora has to acquire from now on. Text number 2b, student page 5. ושני תולד וזוב, מה תקנתו ויתרפא, ישפיל אותו מגאוותו כתולעת וכאזוב. Right? She says, a strip of crimson wool and hyssop, what is the remedy so that he might be healed of tzara'at? He must humble himself from his haughtiness, like the worm which infested the berries from which a crimson dye was extracted to color the wool, and the lowly hyssop, which is a very small herb. So the healing has two parts. Sur mera vasetov. Go away from evil, go away from an ego that is out of control, and therefore it gets into everybody's lives. And asetov, do good, be humble. So it's interesting that we use two birds. The question is, why two birds? One is slaughtered, but the second one is a very strange sacrifice. You send it away, you send the bird to fly away. So why did you bring it into the temple in the first place? What do we need it for? So a person that sinned with lashon hara could reach an unfortunate conclusion, could rationalize that speaking is troublesome, and you got him into this spot. Therefore, because I heard so many people, I shouldn't speak at all. That's it. Keep quiet. And there was in times of old some people that were like that. They put wax on their ears not to hear anybody, not to hear anything negative, and they didn't speak. They were just sitting with the book. But our parshas, we will see soon, says, no, that's not the way of doing things. And just to understand this better, it's a story of a man that had this problem. He just said everything that came to mind, often hurting people, and he didn't know what to do about it. He said, Rabbi, I know I have this issue. How do I deal with it? Rabbi says, I'll give you a tikkun. Go home, take your pillow full of feathers, and go around town and leave one feather in every corner. And then come back to me. After a few hours, this gentleman comes back, and the rabbi says, okay, this was half of your kapara. Now, to finish it, go back to every corner of town and bring me back all those feathers, and then you'll be forgiven. He says, but Rabbi, the feathers are very light. But by the time I go back, they're all gone. It's impossible. So the rabbi said the same is with words. Words are very light. They travel everywhere. Once you said them, they own you. We have to be very careful. We own words before we express them. Once we express them, they own us. And we have to be very careful of what we say. On the other hand, the fact that words have this ability to fly and to go and to be everywhere, reach everywhere in the world, we know that today it's a beautiful blessing because you share a positive word, you share encouragement, words of wisdom, positive words, and your words are not limited to your immediate area, but they can reach everywhere in the world. So the message from the flying bird is don't stop talking. No, words are very powerful. And if you hurt people in the past with your words, now look for ways to use your speech in a positive, encouraging, comforting way. Make people laugh, make people smile, make people happy, encourage them rather than what you did before. And let's see the text number 3. The reason for the two birds, there are two kinds of speech. One type is forbidden, while the other type is used for a mitzvah. Forbidden speech includes lashon hara and the like, in which one behaves like a chirping bird. For this kind of speech, the Torah tells us that the chattering bird should be slaughtered. Now, the live bird represents the talk of Torah and prayer. However, such speech must be combined with the humility represented by the cedar wood, crimson wool, and hyssop. So, we understand now that there is different sacrifices that represent all the steps that metzora, the person with this illness, must follow in order to purify himself. Now, after he's sprinkled with this mixture, he goes into the mikvah. Him and his clothing have to be purified, and after he counts 7 days, he pretty much goes back to life as normal, besides that he's forbidden to engage in marital relations for that week. On the 7th day, he shaves the hair of his body. Once again, he goes into the mikvah, also his clothing, and the process is pretty much complete, but he needs to bring the sacrifice to the temple. Text number 4, Vayom Hashmini, and on the 8th day, you should take 2 unblemished male lambs, 1 unblemished ewe lamb in its first year, 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with olive oil as a meal offering, and 1 log of olive oil. Now, this is interesting that this could be quite expensive to bring all these animals. So we assess this on a sliding scale. If this is too costly for the person to bring and he cannot complete this atonement process, then we give him a discount. Just bring 1 lamb, bring a smaller meal offering, and 2 birds. Let's see text number 5. But if he's poor and cannot afford these sacrifices, you should take 1 male lamb as a guilt offering for a waving to effect atonement for him, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a meal offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves according to what he can afford. 1 shall be a sin offering, and 1 a burnt offering. I shall bring them on the 8th day of his cleansing to the Kohen, to the entrance of the tent of the meeting before Hashem. So, to recap what we learned so far, all the aspects of the metzora purification symbolize the pride which led him to sin, and the humility that he needs now in his new life, and that's how we'll be cured. Now, we mentioned that the final component of the sacrifice for atonement is to bring this korban, this offering to Hashem. Now let's say that the person that was afflicted with this tzarat, he can't afford to make the trip to Jerusalem to go to the temple, or he doesn't have the money or the means or the time, for whichever reason he can't make it. And somebody says, hey, I would like to help. A kind person says, you know what? I'll bring the offering for you. Is he allowed to do such a thing? Can you bring an offering for somebody else, a korban? According to halacha, if both parties agrees, yes. Somebody might step in and say, I'm bringing the sacrifice of atonement instead of the person which actually had the rush in his skin. Now, the question is, what kind of sacrifice does he bring? Let's say that the person with the affliction in his skin was a poor person, and the kind soul that offered to step up is a wealthy person. Should he bring the more expensive atonement sacrifice, or should he bring the simple one? Or what about the other way around? Let's say that the person with the affliction on his skin was wealthy, and the kind person says, I'll take his place, I'll bring the sacrifice, is poor. Can a poor person, he can afford only something small, can he bring such a sacrifice? Or we say, no, you have to bring, he made a commitment, he needs to bring a expensive sacrifice, so bring that. What do you think? Now, the Rambam gives a very interesting halacha, which has amazing lesson for us today, how to behave during these difficult times of a pandemic in the world. Text number 6. When a rich man says, I take responsibility for the sacrifices of the afflicted person, and the afflicted person was poor, he must bring the sacrifice of a wealthy man, for the person who took the vow has the financial capacity. Now, if the other way around, if a poor person said, I take responsibility for the sacrifice of this afflicted person, and the afflicted person was wealthy, he must bring the sacrifice of a wealthy man, for the person who took the vow obligated himself to bring the sacrifices of a wealthy man. He took his place. So, seems to be a little strange, because if one is bringing the offering, is not poor, okay, we understand that he doesn't get a pass. But if the person that is poor, why do we make him pay for something he can't really afford? Let's see text number 7 from the Talmud. The Mishnah states, when one says, I take upon myself the offering of this metzora, if the metzora is destitute, the one who takes the vow brings the offering of a destitute person. Talmud asks, does this apply even when the one who vowed is wealthy? Doesn't the verse state that the less expensive offerings worth only if he's poor? Whereas in the case, he, the one bringing the offering, is not poor, the verse thus teaches that the leniency of less expensive offering does not apply when the metzora is destitute and the one who vowed on his behalf is wealthy. So we learn from, okay, this makes sense. If a poor person had the lesions on the skin and the wealthy person said, I'll bring a sacrifice, he has the means, okay, fine, we make him pay more because he has the means. But it's interesting that he's becoming responsible for something that the other person wasn't, because he's taking the responsibility of the other person. Let's say somebody lives in what they call Section 8 housing, discounted housing, and is in an apartment that usually rent should be $3,000, and he's paying only $1,000 rent. Yet he's struggling right now, and he can't even afford that. So a kind soul says, you know what? I'll help you with the rent for this month. How much is the rent? $1,000. You don't say because this kind soul is wealthy, he should pay $3,000. No, he's taking the commitment of the poor person. He should pay what he pays the rent every month. So let's continue with the text number 8. The Rebbe says the following. The first clause in Rambam states, when a rich man says, I take responsibility for the sacrifice of this afflicted person, and the afflicted person was poor, he must bring the sacrifices of wealthy men. For the person who took the vow has the financial capacity. This is puzzling. Why does the person who took the vow need to bring the more expensive offering just because he has the financial capacity. After all, he assumed responsibility for the offering of this metzora. And this metzora is poor. So why does he become obligated to bring the offering of a different metzora? Have a wealthy one. The one who took the vow has no personal obligation to bring any metzora offering at all. He merely has assumed the poor man's obligation. On what basis then is he left with an obligation to bring a rich man's offering? How does a wealthy metzora get into the picture? Why do we make him pay the more expensive sacrifice? So the idea is that when you make this kind of commitment, you're not just saying, I will pay what he owes. No, you're saying, I'm stepping in his place. I'm his shaliach. I'm replacing him. It's interesting. Jewish law says as if a person appoints a shliach, an emissary, someone to go to the chuppah and marry his bride for him. So the shliach, this emissary, could be standing in the chuppah, giving a ring to the bride and saying, with this ring, you will be married to the person that appointed me as a shaliach. This is the power that the Torah conveys to someone that is appointed as an emissary. So we're saying that the wealthy person is not just taking the financial responsibility, is really replacing the metzora. But now it's interesting. If that's the case, why don't we say that when the poor metzora steps up and says, the poor person says, I will help the wealthy metzora. So, okay, if I'm stepping in his place, I should be able to pay what I can afford, no more than that. So to understand this, we have to understand the two dynamics at play. This spiritual atonement that is reached through this ceremony is a very deep soul connection that takes place with the metzora. Now, the shaliach, the person taking his place, is not just fulfilling a financial commitment. He's doing so much more than that. Let's see what the Rebbe says on text number 9. In this law, the point is the metzora's atonement. Thus, Jewish law emphasizes how the one who took the vow brings the offering not to fulfill his legal obligation incurred by his vow, but rather to achieve the metzora's atonement. Therefore, the wealthy donor must bring the sacrifices of a wealthy man, because owing to our mutual responsibility to one another, it's possible for a donor to assume responsibility for the metzora's offering, and if the donor was himself the metzora, because the donor is now the one bringing the offering, we assess the offering in this regard, according to the means of the donor, not the means of the metzora. If he has the financial capacity, must bring the more expensive offering, because the Torah states that the less expensive offering is brought only if the responsible party is poor. And in this case, he's not poor because he became responsible for the metzora. So it's not like paying rent. I'm responsible for his rent and I'm paying exactly what he was supposed to pay. No. You take full responsibility. You are in his place now. And your commitment is all your assets. It's like someone signing for a loan by the bank. The bank will come after this person and it will assess everything that he has. So now, in the other case, when the metzora is rich, with the person with the illusion skin is rich, and the replacement is poor, why don't we say the same thing? Listen, he's poor. He can't afford a bigger commitment. Let's just look at his financials and bring the smaller offering. So now is when it gets very interesting. And we say that when a poor person decides to step in and help another one, he reaches a whole new level. To understand this is another discussion in Halacha. Can I make a vow that I will put on tefillin from now on every day? Or a woman will light Shabbat candles every Friday? Seems to be a pointless vow, because I'm already obligated by the Torah to put on tefillin, to light Shabbat candles. So what is the point of making such a promise that I will do what anyways God told me I must do every day? So this is what the Talmud says in text number 10. From where is this derived that one may take an oath to fulfill a mitzvah? The verse states, I have sworn, I have confirmed to observe your righteous ordinances. Now, is one not already under oath from when each Jew took the oath at Mount Sinai to fulfill all the mitzvot? Rather, the verse teaches that it is permitted for a man to motivate himself to fulfill the mitzvot by taking an oath to do them, even though the oath is not technically valid. It's no point to the oath. But you know what? Do it. If it makes you happy, if it help you do the mitzvah because you make such an oath, it will give you an extra boost of energy because you're consciously recommitting. It's like a couple that they're renewing their vows. They're married, but they want to show how much they love each other and the strong commitment they have. It's a beautiful ceremony to do such a thing. So the matter becomes more personal. You take ownership, responsibility. Go ahead, vow, and do it every day. So the Rebbe explained, we say that when a poor person takes the place of a rich metzora, the dynamic works the same way. He is empowered in such a way that he is obligated all of a sudden on a higher caliber of offering. Why? Because he took a vow, he took responsibility. This empowers him to be on the level of the rich person. And it will be giving strength and the ability to do something that before he was not able to do. So this empowers him to reach above his means. And we'll see soon how it works. That's text number 11. There is a profound idea at play here. When one Jew steps in to help achieve atonement for another, if the donor himself is poor while the other is wealthy, Torah considers the donor to be wealthy, obligating him to bring the more expensive offering on the other party's behalf. If the donor were himself a metzora, God forbid, he will not be obligated to bring the more expensive offering. But when he takes it upon himself to help someone else, he becomes obligated to bring it. He himself is now considered able to afford it. And there's a fascinating story with the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe that he called one of the Hasidim, Elchanan Glazer, and he says, I want to print a halachic responsa of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. This was the year 1945 when printing was not as affordable as today. And he says, I want you to sponsor it. And first of all, in the US at that time, there was not too many people that could understand the depth of this halachic response. And second of all, this was well above the means of Reb Elchanan. He couldn't afford it. But the Rebbe said, I want you to take this commitment, even though you can't afford it. And this will bring blessing to you, and you will be able to afford it. In other words, when we step up to help another, to do something for the community, even if we don't have the means, but by just making the commitment, God will give you the means, or perhaps you discover that you had the means, you just didn't know about it, or God gave you something you actually didn't have. Let's see text number 12. The Alter Rebbe the founder of Chabad Hasidic movement and the author of Tanya, said, when a Jew thinks of giving a certain amount of money to charity, for example, when he's approached for a certain cause, and he thinks, when God helps me out, I will contribute X amount of money to this cause, he must know that he's promptly blessed with that amount from above. Now, what is the solution to be able to contribute not just the amount he can currently afford, but the amount he truly wishes to give? The solution is to give right away. This creates a new pool of resources to indeed be capable of giving the amount that he wishes. The highest quality of charity is to give when it isn't easy. You wish for us to be able to say that you're the main contributor toward my activities. May God fulfill your desire. But a certain amount of self-sacrifice is necessary for that. You surely remember what we discussed 14 years ago when it was out of the question to speak of donating sums like we are discussing now. Likewise, God will help you that in a year from now, you will be able to contribute sums that are currently out of the question. So what the Rebbe is saying is that you can create new channels by making such a commitment, and the Rebbe is encouraging people to help others, help the community. Don't be afraid to make a commitment that you can't afford. Why? Because God will open new channels of blessings and you'll be able to do more. So the idea that commitment brings resources is learned from our parsha, that the commitment of the poor metzora is to bring the more expensive offering, what something that was beyond his means before, he will be able to afford it. Let's see text number 13. The spiritual reason the poor donor must bring the more expensive offering is illustrated by the oft-quoted story of my father-in-law, the Rebbe, when he was dealing with printing the response of the Tzemach Tzedek for the first time in the United States. He recommended to a certain Jew that he sponsor the printing costs, though it was entirely beyond the fellow's means at the time. The man took the project upon himself and the Rebbe blessed him, etc. He subsequently became quite wealthy and succeeded in fulfilling his pledge completely. He sponsored the entire printing himself. My father-in-law, the Rebbe, said at the time that when he asked the Jew to make the pledge, it was truly beyond his means. It was even beyond the means he was endowed with from heaven. But the pledge itself opened new channels of income, enabling him to fulfill his pledge. This explains our halacha. When God sees our Jew reaches beyond his personal limits, ignoring his poverty and stepping in beyond his abilities to help achieve atonement for his fellow, the wealthy man, God opens new channels of income for him, enabling him to fulfill his pledge from a position of wealth. So, as the Rebbe explains that the sixth Rebbe didn't just coax someone to reach their maximum contributing potential, because it wasn't his maximum. He couldn't reach that. He couldn't afford it. So what did he do? He helped him open completely new channels. How? By making a new commitment. By his pledge, he acquired new wealth that it was impossible for him to dream of before. So the same is when a less wealthy person steps in to take the place of the metzora, he is giving the ability to really take his place and reach a whole new level. I will answer the questions that people are sending in a moment. So I just want to finish the conclusion. The idea is not just on those times, but when we see a person who needs healing, who is struggling in any way, we tend to evaluate and say, okay, let me see, am I the best person to help? Do I have all the means, the experience? Perhaps there is people that know more than me. Let's say you see someone struggling with an addiction. So I'm not a professional in the field, but I shouldn't say let the professionals take, let others handle. The fact that you are witnessing and that you're aware of this issue is that God is telling you, you have to do something about it. Or should professionals say, we could also, but Israel arevim ze bazeh. Jewish people are responsible for one another. And I have to do something to help this person. And perhaps I don't have all the means. God will help you with illuminate, will give you wisdom, will make sure that you're not in a state of the poor person anymore, but all of a sudden you have the wisdom, the ability to help this person. And I saw it in my own life. Many times I took commitments, specifically in this, and people with addictions, people to lead interventions, to do things that I thought I don't have a chance of being successful. And I didn't have the ability or the wisdom or the experience to do it, but God blessed, and I was able to fulfill the goal, the mission, because if God puts it your way, is for a reason, and He will reveal strengths that either you had deep in between you and you weren't aware, or will give you new strengths and transform it from a poor person into new wealth. So, to recap what we learned, a person could say, I take the place of a metzora, I will bring a sacrifice for atonement, and even if he doesn't have the means, he has to reach to the higher level, and God will give him the means. In other words, when we step up to help others, we are endowed with new resources to achieve what was previously beyond our capabilities. So we have a question from Mika that says, which means usually we don't rely on miracles. So what can you say? So the idea here is that it's not a miracle. This is the way the world works. It's not a miracle. God is saying, you make the commitment, I will help you. And as we know, there's many ways to think about that. If we say with Zochim Alanes, we wouldn't have a state of Israel, we wouldn't have so many things that we have. So the person does what he can do, he makes the commitment, and God will do the rest. And we have a question from Meir, are these type of commitments considered some level of tzedakah or complete different actions? Yes, we're talking about tzedakah, commitment to give tzedakah, commitment to give of your time, even if you don't seem to have time, like Pirkei Avot says, don't say I will study when I have time, because maybe you will never have time. So first make the commitment, push someone. I say, I want to study for 2 hours every day, even you don't have 2 hours, and God will give you the time, will help you have atzlacha b'zman, to be successful in your time managing, and you will be able to do that. I would like to finish with a story how God gives you the opportunity to do things that usually are not available, perhaps, or not regular. One day, I get a phone call from someone quite desperate in New York. He says that his cousin had a bad accident in Baja, California, and he's in the hospital, and it's in a very bad situation, and needs help. And I said, okay, I'll be glad to help. In which hospital is? He says, oh, I don't know the name of the hospital. Okay, on which town he is? I said, oh, I don't know in which town. So Baja California, as you know, goes from Tijuana more than 1,000 miles south all the way to Cabo. It's quite a large state. And he couldn't give me a clue. He couldn't give me details. He gave me some information. It was very vague. The logical thing will be to say, okay, I'll wait. You know, when you have more data, when you can tell me something, I'll help. But I sense a desperation in his voice, and I started making phone calls. I knew it wasn't probably Tijuana, it wasn't a big city. So after many phone calls to police, to hospitals, miracle of Hashem, I found him, I believe it was in Guerrero Negro, quiet south. It was, yeah, pretty far from the border. And I spoke with the doctors, and they told me that the situation was very difficult and they couldn't help him. They have the means on this small hospital. So we were able to arrange for an air ambulance to fly him to the United States from this small town. And a couple of days later, the cousin said, you know, the doctors in New York said that thank God he came so fast, because he had a very bad back injury. If they wouldn't have done the surgery right away on him, he would have been paralyzed for the rest of his life. So, and some hilariousness, but on the other hand, we do all that we can. I tried, and God helped me. I didn't have the means to call every single hospital, but somehow God made it work, and it worked out amazing. But this is not the end of the story. I only put the two parts together much later, but a few weeks after that, my Hillel, my son at the time, he was a young child. He was 2 years old, if I'm not mistaken. He was walking in the shul in Tijuana, and they were fixing a cistern, which is a very deep hole in the ground. And once the people working on it forgot and left the trap door open, and he fell more than 20 feet. And when Avram calls me, so we took him immediately to the hospital, and Baruch Hashem, the doctor said it was a miracle, even though it was a terrible fall and he fell and nothing happened. And I said, you know, I put the two and two together. I said, because I did something beyond my means, sacrificed myself in a sense to help a complete stranger. Hashem helped me, and later when my son was in need, he made a miracle for him as well. So I want to bless all of us that we should find the inner strength to do more than what we think is possible, especially in these times that are challenging times. We should look to help others, to bring light into the world, to sacrifice ourselves, even if it doesn't come natural, and Hashem will help and will be able to do so much more. If anybody has any questions, I'll be glad to answer them now. Mika, did I answer your question okay?
Yeah. Challenging, but yes.
Okay. Baruch Hashem.